Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for coming and welcome to De Montfort Hall. My name's Jeff Rowe. I'm the director of Dave's Leicester Comedy Festival, and I think you're in for a very interesting afternoon. The format of today is that in a moment I'll introduce you to Nick Wisdom. We'll do the interview and then we'll have a break of maybe 15 minutes or so, and then of course you're all welcome to stay and watch the film, which should finish I think at about 4:30 or so, but we'll see how we get on. So it gives me great pleasure to introduce you this afternoon to Nick Wisdom.
I hope I get that applause at the end.
So, Nick, thank you very much for coming this afternoon.
My pleasure.
Thank you very much for all the work that you've put into the exhibition, which we'll come on to in a minute. But some of you might know I helped set up the Comedy Festival back in the early 1990s. And I still remember the conversation that the group of us had about trying to get some patrons to support the festival. And we invited Tony Slattery to become a patron of the festival, but we wanted to make sure that our patrons represented the breadth and diversity of British comedy. And it didn't take very long for us to think of writing to Norman Wisdom and asking him if he would support the festival. And I wrote down what he wrote for our first forward in our brochure. And he said, "I wish everybody involved great success, and I'm pleased to be associated with such a worthwhile venture." And for a number of years after that, I'd written back to Norman and asked him to come and perform at the festival. And for various reasons, it wasn't possible. But then in 2002, I think it was, he performed here at De Montfort Hall as part of the Comedy Festival. And coincidentally, we've just been sat in the very dressing room where I met Norman back in 2002, which was a nice part of this afternoon, I think. And then in 2013, the readers of the Leicester Mercury recognised your father with a Legend of Comedy Award, and I was delighted to present that to your father's agent, Johnny Manns. Yeah. So just first of all, can you pick up the story from then, Nick, and tell us how this exhibition has ended up in Leicester?
Well, you just touched on it. I mean, somebody came into my business and gave me a newspaper cutting from the Leicester Mercury sorry, I'll move that a bit closer. That's better. They gave me this newspaper cutting saying that he'd won this Legend of Comedy Award and he was a patron of the Leicester Comedy Festival. And I thought, and I just opened the exhibition in Haywards Heath, actually, my hometown in Sussex. And I thought, well, that sounds the sort of place I'd like to put it down the line for those reasons. Obviously, people in Leicester have voted for him, so they must like him. And also, it's the hub of the Midlands. It's accessible. That's the sort of place I'd like to put it. And so when the time came, I Googled the Leicester Comedy Festival and Jeff Rowe's name came up, and I emailed him, and I think you thought I was a crank, actually, didn't you?
Well, I do remember the phone call that we received in the office, and our office manager said, "There's somebody on the phone who claims to be Norman Wisdom's son." And I thought, well, it's either Norman Wisdom's son or it is a crank who believes he's Norman Wisdom's son. But I was mightily relieved to hear that it was you.
But I think anyway, the penny dropped and we got going, and I sent him a few pictures, and we got down the line and we were talking about possible venues, and I have to say that I knew of the De Montfort Hall, and I thought, well, that's really where I would like it, if possible. And Jeff's come up with the goods, he's talked to them, and we're here. And you know, it's a lovely venue to be in, actually. I'm really pleased that we're here.
And do you want to mention the significance of the 4th of February?
Well, Jeff did say to me, he said, well, look, there's one thing that has to happen. The comedy festival starts on the 4th of February, so we really do need to open the exhibition on the 4th. And I said, fine. And then when we put the phone down, I suddenly thought, hang on, that's my father's 100th birthday. And it spooked me out, and I emailed back and I said, thought you might find it interesting to know that February the 4th is my father's 100th birthday. And Jeff just put, then we must open on that day. It was meant to be, wasn't it?
We had no choice. No choice.
No choice, yeah.
So I just want to start off really by focusing on the exhibition, and how did it start to be put together? Can you just tell us a bit about the origins of it?
Well, I always, when I went to the Isle of Man to visit him, I always liked looking around. I mean, he had a study with some memorabilia in it. He had some pictures on the wall and some bills and theatre bills, and he had a garage loft, and he had a filing cabinet, and I used to have a little ferret around in there, and I used to see sort of contracts and theatre bills, and there was a lot of interesting stuff, and I thought, well, one day I would like to do something with it, but not knowing really how much there was. And it was only when he passed and we had everything came over to Sussex in boxes in my garage that I started sifting through it, and I probably sifted through it for the best part of 6 months. It took a long time, and I realized just how much material there was, and some of it really excited me. Like, there was handwritten scripts going back to pre-Showbusiness days, like when he was in the army. It was all in a folder, and it was in good condition, and I just thought, wow, this is going to be great. And there was a person in Haywards Heath who was a framer, and he said, I told him about it, and he said, well, if I can help you. But I was very protective about it. I thought I didn't want to give it to anybody. And I thought, in the end, I just gave him the first one to do, which was Collins Music Hall 1945, his first professional engagement, and a handwritten script. And within 2 days, he had it back to me in a mount and all framed up, and it looked absolutely fabulous. And I just knew then, I thought, this is it, off we go. And for the next sort of year, I just locked myself in this room at home. My wife wasn't very happy because I wasn't watching much TV with her, but and you're still doing that, are you? You know. Anyway, we got some great. I got some great stuff, and what I do is I go through everything. It was like a jigsaw puzzle. You know, you'd have photographs, handwritten scripts, theatre bills, and then I had all this research to do as well. I had to make sure I got all the right dates and everything in the right frame. And I managed to do that because there was a book by Richard Dacre of every single appearance he ever did, TV, stage, films. It was like a Bible, really. So I used that. I used my father's book, which he wrote, My Turn. And also I had a massive volume of press cuttings going back from 1948. So I could pinpoint not only the date, I could pinpoint the day and the month, the day, everything, when he actually met people. And I had pictures, so everything's tied in. So you'll notice on a lot of the pictures, it's got the actual day when it was actually taken, the photograph. That's because there was press coverage of it. So, it really did start coming together, and I would put a plan on the floor and take a photograph of it and then give it to the frame and say, right, that's the layout I want. And we've now ended up with 68 frames. And that's it. I'm not doing any more.
And what people have seen outside, is that everything, or presumably you've got a few treasured items that you've kept at home?
No, I've got some silverware, more silverware. I've got his Academy Award, which is wonderful, 1953 Best Newcomer for Trouble in Store, yes, there's a few other things, but. That's really it. Yeah, I've got some more, but I mean that's the cream. You can end up putting photographs in frames, but you can't just keep doing it. I think you've got the main pictures there really.
So you were at home working all the time. It sounds like for 6 months to a year, framing it, putting together, tying the pictures and the materials in with key dates.
Yeah,
and then. most of the exhibition has been seen already in Haywards Heath.
Yes, it has.
So how did you go from? Did you know from the very beginning that you wanted to perform an exhibition, or was it something you were doing out of your own interest?
I just felt I had to do so. I just thought I had this fantastic material. I thought I've got to do something with it. If it goes in the loft, you lose the moment, and then we've all done it. If we all went in our lofts now, there's stuff there which you probably had never 25 years. It would be the same with that. It'd just sit there and probably deteriorate. So I knew I had to get on with it, really. That was the reason.
So you put it up first of all in Haywards Heath.
Haywards Heath, it went into first. We managed to secure an empty shop, and it went down really well. I was quite touched. People would stop me in the street, and the most common thing that people would say was, "Thank you for letting us see it," because they don't expect to just walk off the high street and into a shop and see an exhibition of photographs like that and material. So I was really touched, and people were really excited, and it was a real trip down memory lane for a lot of people. And I was so glad I'd done it. And once I got that reaction, I knew I wanted to take it somewhere else. Yeah.
I've said to you before, I think the interesting thing about the exhibition is, of course, it's about Norman's career and it's an archive of Norman wisdom, but it's also the people I've spoken to about the exhibition. It brings back so many other memories of venues that you might remember visiting, or that of an era that probably we won't see again. And I think it's a fantastic, comprehensive collection of materials. So thank you very much for bringing it to Leicester. Yeah. There's some new items here, isn't there, that weren't seen in Haywards Heath. Can you just explain which ones are they?
Well, there's one that people keep mentioning to me, which they really like, the one where I'm putting porridge over my father's head. And I wasn't going to put that in. I thought, no, well, that's nothing to do with his career, really. You've got to put it in, and okay. And that's the one that everybody seems to like. Slightly stage managed, I think. I've also done one, there's quite an interesting one, he's in a cage with an orangutan. Yeah, and that was a very interesting story, quite tragic, really, because he was in the cage, and he was putting the cap on the orangutan's head, and they were drinking a pint of milk, and his hands around here. And then after a time, the gamekeepers said, "Norman, I want you to leave the cage now. He's had enough. And don't rush, but make your way to the exit." And he did, and this hatch opened, and he said he just dived straight through this hatch headlong, and he felt the orangutan's hand just brush his foot.
Goodness.
And the next day, the orangutan mauled a gamekeeper to death.
Really?
Yeah, so, you can understand. That would never happen today. He would never have been in that cage today.
No.
But they are brilliant photographs. But there's a little bit of a sad ending to that one.
Yeah. Goodness.
Yeah.
Goodness.
And I've also got one which I was very pleased about. And people pointed it out at Haywards Heath, actually. "You're missing one." I said, "What's that?" He said, "Sunday night at the London Palladium, Bruce Forsyth." I said, "Yes, I know." I said, "I've sent a script to Bruce Forsyth. Has he signed it?" "No." And it took me a year to get him to sign it. He had a room, and there was letters, and he hadn't even opened the letter. And I sent him another script and said, "Look, it really is for a good cause. We're having an exhibition. I'd love you to do it." And he wrote me a lovely letter back saying, "How embarrassed am I?" He said, "I'm so sorry." He said, "But, I've signed them both, and here they come. And if there's anything else you want me to do, I'll do it." And he put, "If you can wait that long." But he was brilliant, Bruce, anyway. And I actually picked it up from the frame of the day I brought it up here. So that's hot off the press, that one. But I was so pleased to get Sunday night at the London Palladium, because that was an iconic performance by both of them. Yeah.
Because I don't know whether people realise. Nick's talked about framing the materials and putting the exhibition together. But you put it up. It's been a complete project for you from start to finish. Nick was here over a number of days, putting it up, deciding where everything was going to go. It's your exhibition for your dad, isn't it?
Yeah, you can't just turn up with 60 or 70 photos and say, right, and pictures, and say, well, let's see where we can put these. There was a proper plan. Everything, I knew exactly where everything was going to go when I came through the door. And that, well, it has to be that way, really, doesn't it? Have to be organised.
So other than the Palladium script, which you just mentioned, what would be your, is it fair to say, favourite item as part of
From the
exhibition?
collection?
Yeah.
Well, I would say I really like the top of the bill, Golders Green Hippodrome, because that's quite a pivotal moment that. And he was, he ended up top of the bill just before that. He was at the London Casino, and he wasn't top of the bill, but he was performing. And you remember the singer Jack Jones? Well, his father was Alan Jones, the singer, and he became ill during the show. And they asked my father, they said, right, well, you're going to take his spot now. And it went down really well. And Bernard Delfont then put him in the next show. He put him on at the Golders Green Hippodrome, and he was top of the bill on merit. So I've put actually top of the bill on there. And it was also a year when he got a new agent called Billy Marsh. And Billy Marsh took him right through his career. He did all the film contracts, America, everything. And he was a very important person in my father's career. So that one, with the hand scripts as well, handwritten scripts, the Golders Green Hippodrome is an important one. But I think the original suit, probably overall, closely followed by Laurel and Hardy. The Laurel and Hardy one got a lot of interest in Haywards Heath. People love that.
Yeah.
Everybody wanted to buy it. Nothing's for sale, I'm afraid. But no, the original suit is iconic, isn't it? And
Yeah.
it's amazing how it's been in the family since 1948, and you can see it was too small for him. But he's got the button's been ripped out 3 or 4 times, and he put a cord across it. And he used to. He didn't think much of the original suit. When I mentioned it, he went, "Oh, I know why, because it was just too tight on him."
Yes.
He had some more made up, and then he used those. He probably didn't. Once he had some more made up, he wouldn't have worn the original suit again.
Do you think? I don't know whether this is an impossible question to answer. Do you think he knew that this exhibition would eventually happen? Was he a hoarder, or was he keeping materials that one day would be shown as a collection, do you think?
Well, I thought there was a bit of hoarding in it, actually, but I found a letter which he wrote to his agent, Johnny Manns, and he'd lent Johnny Manns some memorabilia. And he said in the letter, he said, "Johnny, this material means an awful lot to me. I hope you will send it back to me, all in good time." And that tells me that it wasn't hoarding. He actually wanted to keep it. And he was kind of hoping, I suppose, that it would be put on walls at some stage.
What would he have made of it, do you think?
I think he'd have loved it. It would have been great if he could have been here today, wouldn't he? Taking you round it in person. But no, he would have loved it. He would have loved it. And he would have got quite emotional, I'm sure, about that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So just thinking about growing up with your father, we've sort of focused on the exhibition, but what was he like? What was it like to have Norman Wisdom as your dad?
That was great fun.
Was it?
Yes. I mean, I didn't see much of him when I was very young. I mean, I was born in 1953, so that was the 1953 was the first film, Trouble in Store. And he had an enormous workload. I mean, he would film at Pinewood Studios. He'd leave at 7 in the morning, and at about 5 o'clock, he'd be picked up and he'd be taken to the West End, where he'd be in Paris to Piccadilly, and he'd do 2 shows, a 6:15 and an 8:50, get back home at 1 o'clock in the morning, leave again at 7 o'clock the next morning. I don't know. So I was in bed both ends. So I didn't see much of him for the early years, really. But then that, you get used to it. That's the way it was. And I can remember I would go to films at an early age. I can remember back to sort of 1956 was probably the earliest one. I remember going to Worthing on the coast and watching him, and everybody would go to the Norman Wisdom film, the new Norman Wisdom film. But he was great fun, and he was very interested in sport, and he'd be chilling out really on a Sunday. We'd only really see him on a Sunday because he was performing Saturday nights, and he'd be relaxing really at home.
What age did you realise you had such a famous father? Because presumably, in your early years, you didn't know he was just your dad. But at what point did you think, oh, hang on a minute, lots of people seem to know who he is?
I can remember going to a film in the cinema, and at the end, everybody stood up and applauded. And I thought, my gosh, they're applauding my father. And it was a very
He wasn't there, presumably.
He wasn't there, no. It'd be a very proud moment, actually. And then I went to Where's Charlie? That was on in London, the Palace Theatre, 1958. I remember going to that. I don't remember much about the show at all. I just remember enjoying it. And, there was the thrill of going backstage as well. I used to love going backstage, and this was an experience, really, journey into the unknown. No.
And what did your school friends think? Did they comment on it?
Well, they may have done initially, but I mean, once they've commented on it once, that was it. It never got brought up again, really.
Right.
No, it was no big deal.
Right. Okay. And you are in one of his films, is that right? You've got a part in one of his films.
It was, yes. It was Follow a Star, and I was having a piano lesson with an actress called June Laverick, as was my sister, who happens to be in the front row today.
What a coincidence!
It was a great day, but I was so nervous. I mean, you're in a film set, and there's a lot of people, and you can feel it's a bit like going to the dentist in a waiting room, and you've got 4 or 5 people in front of you, and slowly then it's 4, then it's 3, then it's 2, and you're getting closer. And I could feel the tension mounting, and they were getting close, and everything. It takes so long to get anything done. You think, are they ever going to film it? And then you sit down at the piano, and then the director says, right, quiet everybody. And then you would just feel, my goodness me, and then everyone's looking at you, and then and action. And they had these piano, and I was playing the piano, and there was no noise coming out of it, which was there on purpose. And finally, when Jackie went on, there was a key at the end, one key, and she found it. It went bing, bing, bing. Right, take 2. And anyway, June Laverick said to me, she said, I didn't say anything. She just said, all right, Nicholas, that's it for today. I'll see you on Wednesday. And I got off that chair, and I went whoosh out of the set. You've never seen anybody move so fast.
Really?
I couldn't wait to get off.
How did that happen? Did you pester your dad to be in the film? Or
no, it was
it was
his idea. No, he didn't ask me. He told me.
He told you.
Yeah.
And did you have an opportunity to hang around on sets at Pinewood Studios, for example, quite often?
Yeah, we did. I mean, I can remember some of the films. Bulldog Breed, On the Beat, Pressed for Time. When he came, actually, Pressed for Time was a good one. He was opening. It was Keir Hardy estate, new houses, and there were so many people in the top. In one of the bedrooms, I think, upstairs, he actually burst through the side of the building and came and fell down. And he landed on a load of cardboard boxes. But it took forever to film this. They were cutting through the wood so that he actually did come through. So there were some very interesting scenes, but you do wonder how they ever finished the film. So little got done.
And were you ever tempted to enter show business? Were you ever tempted to follow the same path as your father?
Well, I do like his humour, and I have my moments, but I could never have followed him, and I think it would have been very unwise to have tried to be honest with you. I think the media would have slaughtered me. I think Jackie, my sister, could have done something. I think much more acceptable.
She doesn't look so convinced, I have to say.
I think it would have been accepted. had she done it, but maybe not for me. If I'd done straight acting, possibly, but I didn't want to do straight acting, so I thought I left it be.
Did he encourage you or put you off, or was it never really mentioned?
I had an audition to see if I was good enough for the audition, if you know what I mean, and my heart wasn't really in it. I kind of made my mind up, really.
Fair enough. And what would you say was the highlight of your father's career? From your point of view, what would you say was the top point?
Flying out to New York, I was 1966, I was 12 years old. We went out, the family, to watch him perform on Broadway in a musical called Walking Happy. And it was a great show, and it was a wonderful just to go to New York, really, but to watch your father on Broadway was so exciting. And my mother came, and Jackie and me, and my father's mother, Maud, who was quite a character, she came out as well. So it was a really good Christmas.
That wasn't his first trip to America, presumably.
It wasn't his first trip, but it was his first performance.
Yeah.
I mean, he might have done the Ed Sullivan Show or something like that, but it was his first Broadway performance. Yeah.
And you mentioned your grandmother there. She was, you told me earlier, she was quite a comedy character herself.
Well, I think that's where he got his talent from.
Right.
From her. It's in the genes. I mean, she was not your normal grandmother. I mean, I remember she had me on the disco floor and everything, but she was about 84. She was giving it all, you know, and I thought, my goodness, some energy. And she was a practical joker.
Right.
I mean, you know, she'd lay out the tea on a Sunday afternoon. She'd say, "Oh, Nick, you're a strong lad. Open this jar for me." And a caterpillar on a spring would come out. You know, all sorts of things. And I just really felt that, you know, that's where he got his talent from. Yeah, amazing woman.
And did she used to trip and fall over as well, or did that come from him?
No, she didn't do the trips. No, it's not her age.
No, I guess not. I guess not.
Yeah.
So you talked about on Sundays is when you'd see your dad and spend a bit of time with him. What would he do when he wasn't performing? How would he relax?
Oh, we'd always like to have a nice Sunday lunch, and he'd watch the football in the afternoon. We may well go out. We'd go out and see, because we had a very dear friend of the family was Eddie Leslie, who was his first straight man, and we used to go and visit him, or they'd come down. We had a swimming pool. We'd have some great times there. So we'd do a few things, but you know, and we'd go for a drive. He used to like going for a drive and just seeing friends, really. Quite normal, I think.
Yeah.
Yes.
And he was into his sport, and of course, maybe in a minute we'll just talk about his music, but sport was important to him?
Yes, he loved his
Certainly important
sport.
to you.
Yeah, he was. I mean, he was a flyweight champion of the army. He loved his athletics. He loved his football. He was a director of Brighton and Hove Albion, so he took me to the football matches, and that was great fun. I mean, I remember one morning, 1966, England against West Germany, World Cup final. He summons me to his bedroom, and he says, "Nicholas," he said, "you're watching far too much television. You are not watching the match this afternoon." I said, "You're joking." I said, "It's the World Cup final." He said, "I don't care." I said, "You're watching far too much television. You have square eyes." I said, "You're not watching it." And I started welling up. And I said, "But Dad," he said, "well, the reason you're not watching it is just because we're going." He managed to get tickets through the press, I think. But, you know, that's typical him. You know, he'd sort of let me down, then bring me back up again. Yeah, but it was a great experience, I must admit, going to that with him.
I bet.
Yeah.
I bet.
Yeah.
And so music, he was I think I said earlier on, he was a great musician. I'm not sure he was a great musician, but he was a keen musician.
He was pretty good on quite a few instruments. I think the clarinet was definitely his main instrument, no doubt about that. But he played the sax, and we put some up today, actually, the trumpet, it's all there. Drums. So he had a little routine in his act, and he'd play, 3 or 4 instruments, the drums. Yeah, and he did it pretty well. But that's what he learned to do that in the army, and he just followed it through. But certainly the clarinet, I think, was his best one.
I imagine parties at your house when you were growing up with your dad were fantastic, weren't they?
He didn't like parties.
Did he not?
No, not for me anyway. He didn't give me many parties.
Right.
He was all, oh, look, there's a mark on there and all that sort of stuff. No, he didn't. We didn't have many parties at all. No. I threw a party for him. I threw an 80th birthday party for him, a surprise party.
Right.
And actually, it was quite staggering because at 80 years old, I couldn't find anybody in his films that was alive. They'd all gone. And to think he survived another 15 years after that.
Yeah.
I think the only person that was alive was David Lodge, and his wife wasn't well, so he couldn't come. But that's quite incredible.
Mm.
But I remember we had a party, and he loved it. We had people from all his friends over, and a lot of sports people as well. And I remember that was the only party I can remember, and it was in my house as well.
So he didn't mind if things got scuffed and damaged?
No,
at that party
as
then,
long as it wasn't his house.
Yeah, it didn't matter. So in terms of his career and his performance, he was, I don't know what the phrase is, he determined his own career. He wrote his own stuff. He wrote an awful lot of the scripts.
He did.
For his performances, both in terms of the films and in terms of live performance.
Yeah.
Can you just talk a bit about that and about how he, from your point of view, how he developed his career over time? You mentioned Billy Marsh earlier on.
Yes, Billy Marsh was the one he would look up to. I mean, they were quite Bernard Delfont agency, who Billy Marsh worked for. They were quite protective with him. They were, America. One of the big moguls out there wanted to sign him up on a contract for films, and my father was quite excited about that. But they made sure, with negotiations that he was far too expensive. They wanted to keep him over here.
Right.
But as far as writing his own material, I mean, Eddie Leslie and himself used to write a lot of the films. And that's probably why he always ended up getting the girl at the end of the film, because if you're writing the script, you can do that sort of thing, can't you? So I think that's amazing, actually. You can write your own films and act in them, really. That's quite good. I don't say he did every one, but he's certainly the middle, if you look on the credits, it's always written by Eddie Leslie and Norman Wisdom.
And do you think he was very clear about where he was going and what he wanted to do and what he didn't want to do? You mentioned his agents were very clear about not going to America, but he was very clear about what he wanted to do and what he didn't want to do. Well,
he'd always say to me, there'd be about 7 or 8 things in the pipeline, and you're very lucky if one of them ever comes off. So he's always looking at things. I mean, he did quite a lot. I mean, there was quite a variation of TV, films, on shows, summer season. So there was a lot going on. And I think he was offered, in his heyday, he was offered a lot of parts, and he could afford to be choosy, really.
Yeah. And his appearances on TV as part of the preparation for this, I YouTubed an awful lot. There's not surprisingly zillions of clips of him on chat shows and doing TV. Do you think he enjoyed doing that?
What, chat shows?
Yeah. Did you enjoy him doing that?
No, I didn't think he was very good on chat shows. I thought, he could tell a very good story. He would sit us down. He'd tell us stories which some of them relate to you today. But when he was on chat shows, he would act the fool. And I just think the public wanted to see him sit down and talk about his life. And I used to shout at the television, "Will you sit down?" Because he'd be up and about, and he'd be, sometimes it would work. He was messing around with Des O'Connor once, and they ended up under the sofa, and it was all, he was telling this joke about, I can't tell a joke. I can tell a joke without laughing, but then he burst into laughter and he couldn't control himself. But you've got to choose the right person, the right chat show. He was on with Clive Anderson, and Clive Anderson is a bit of a very dry, quite a bit of a comic himself in a dry sort of way, and he wanted to be in control, and so did my father. So you get a clash of personalities, and I had to sort of switch off that one. But I think he could have done a bit. I think that's the only time really I would be critical. I said to him, I think you should just sit down tell stories like you tell them to the family. Oh yes, but they love it. I said, okay, he'll do what you do what you want to do, won't you?
He wouldn't listen to you,
No,
presumably.
no.
And he wrote a lot of his own stuff, but he also worked with some great straight men. How important do you think some of the people like Jerry Desmond and others were to his writing?
Well,
I
his
suppose,
brand,
and his career?
his brand of comedy, he needed to bounce off someone. I mean, Jerry Desmond was a very powerful man, great presence, very suave, and he saw, my father was sort of an irritant all the time. Go away, and he did a lot of films with Jerry and on stage as well, and a lot of Jerry Desmond you'll see up here today. And he tragically committed suicide in 1966, a year after the film we're about to see. But so he was probably the main man. And then Eddie Leslie, who I've touched on, would have gone back to 1948, Eddie, and went quite the way through. Very wouldn't take any nonsense on stage. Very low tolerance with my father. And it worked quite well. They were pushing each other around the stage, and you get out of it, and you stop. It was all that sort of stuff. And then there was Edward Chapman, Mr. Grimsdale. Now, you can call him a straight man. I thought he was a bit of a buffoon, really, as Mr. Grimsdale.
In a nice way?
Oh yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, he tried to be a straight man, but then of course, he'd get on the phone, wouldn't he? Get me the mayor. And then, of course, the mayor would give him an absolute grilling, and he'd go, "Oh." So he had a bit of a soft underbelly. He was a bit of a coward. If someone was having an injection, like in the army film, if an injection, he'd faint, wouldn't he? So, but they bounced off each other really well. And of course, Mr. Grimsdale is always the phrase used, isn't it?
Yes. Do people say that to you?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. Just might have been playing football 25, 30 years ago, and I get shouted across the field or something. And then there was David Lodge. Now, he came in a bit later. He would have been in the films from about 1960 onwards, and you'd always. My father would wind him up on the films, and you'd always have pictures of him grabbing my dad's lapels and lifting him off his feet, And I remember he was the one that, my father used to, I used to get home, and I'd say to him, "Oh, how did it go today at Pinewood?" or something, and all he'd talk about was, "Oh, I got David Lodge into trouble." I said, "Well, what about?" He said, "Well, yeah, what did you do?" He said, "Well, we were doing the Bulldog Breed, and we were doing the mountaineering sketch, and we were about 30 foot up on a mountain, a made mountain in Beaconsfield Studios, and we all had ropes tied round us, and I'm on the end, and the tea trolley came in, and so I went down the ladder and I started running towards the tea trolley, and you got the situation now where there's a certain amount of slack rope. Once that slack rope becomes taut, you've got 4 other people up on a 30-foot ledge who are going to come down. And they're all absolutely like that. Okay, Norman, stop, Norman. And he stopped, literally, as the rope was about to go taut, and just turned round and looked at them like that. And that's what he used to do. He used to wind them up. And he used to get people into a lot of trouble, and he would get away with it because he was the star. But the directors would take him outside and give him a right dressing down, and it would be my father's fault. I mean, they got their own back once. The Square Peg, he had to dig himself out of a sort of prison, if you like, on the campus, the army campus. And so what it was, he went under the ground, and when it was action, his shovel would come up through the turf, and he was going to come up. So they put him under the ground and put the turf all in place, and they all went off to lunch and just left him down there. So it was got it. So it was a bit of payback. Yeah.
Was he like that at home? Would he mess around at home, or possibly even worse when you were out in public. Would he?
You wouldn't want to be in a supermarket with him. No, I definitely.
Well, no, you see, you wouldn't want to be, but most of the people in this room would have loved to have been in a supermarket.
Yeah, yeah. I didn't always choose the right person to wind up, but there we are. No, I mean, yes, he did used to mess around. Depends what mood he was in, but if he was in one of those moods, you know, he was, well, uncontrollable, really. But at my wedding, actually, he did. I mean, we're having the wedding photographs, and I saw him chatting to the photographer. So we're all like that. And then the next thing, he's done a swallow dive right across the front of the, you know. And you just have to go with the flow, don't you?
But presumably you got to a certain age, teenager age, I'm thinking, where that just became intolerable, did it?
Yeah, I've always said that he's someone that you want to put into a jam jar and just take the lid off now and again.
That's nice. That's nice.
But that day, we couldn't get him back in the jar, I'm afraid.
No.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
But he wasn't always a joker, always messed around. I just want to talk for a few minutes about some of his more serious acting roles, really,
Yeah.
and writing as well. You mentioned earlier on when we were chatting about writing poetry, I think, where it's serious stuff. But so he wasn't always a clown.
No, he funny enough, a lot of the critics gave him quite a panning, actually, over his career. You know, didn't like his films. And so he did a serious role in Going Gently. Two men, Fulton Mackay from Porridge and himself dying of cancer, basically. Very poignant subject, and it was highly acclaimed. And he wanted to do that. And I think a lot of comedians would like to do straight acting at some stage in their career. Just to prove that they can act, I think. But I remember him saying that he felt that straight acting was a lot easier than doing comedy. It's interesting. Yeah.
And can you tell the story about when he was upset because they didn't think he could act?
Oh yes, because he did
it's a
have
great story.
Yeah. Now this was Going Gently, and he was in a room with the producer and the director, a chap called Stephen Frears, and they were concerned. They said, Norman, you know, this is a pretty serious subject, and we're not quite sure that you're the right one for to do this. But what do you think? He said, well, I think so. I said, but what I could do, just to lighten it up a bit, I could wear my dressing gown, and then the cord could become loose, and then I could catch it on one of the springs as I'm walking by, and then trip up and just go over, and their faces were absolute horror. He said, "Whoa, no, oh no," and he said, "No," and then my father lost his temper with him. He said, "How dare you suggest that I would," and then they were saying, "Oh, Norman, you don't have to get like that, no, don't take it, and he said, "It's all right, I'm only acting." And he said, "Touche, yeah, you got the job."
What would you say was your favourite film of his?
The Bulldog Breed, when he was in the Navy. There's certain parts of that. The mountaineering sketch was great, and also when he's man overboard on the ship, and it just tears me up that when he's just nudging everybody overboard. And I mean, I have to say, I went on a cruise not long ago with my wife, and we're having like a drill before we set off, and they're going through all the life jacket procedure and everything, and the captain suddenly said, and of course, if you do hear man overboard, and I started laughing, and I could see some one of the deckhand guys was giving me a bit of a look, and of course I was just imagining him knocking everybody off the ship. You certainly wouldn't want him on deck.
No, you wouldn't. And any ideas as to what his favourite film would have been?
On the Beat he liked, and The Stitch in Time, probably those two. Yeah, he liked those two. They're all pretty good, actually. There's 4 or 5. I say I like The Bulldog Breed. There's 4 or 5 actually, which there's not much between them. But Stitch in Time was certainly very good. That made the Rank organisation a lot of money. That one.
I bet it did.
Yeah.
Did he watch his after he'd made them, did he watch his films?
Oh yes, we used to have to watch you sit through the films.
You had to.
And he'd start laughing. At areas which weren't that funny. And I'd say, what are you laughing at? He said, oh, I remember doing that bit. And he cracked up, and then the director took us outside. And it was all this sort of thing again, misbehaving. And he just remembered, all that part. But, it must have been great fun. I mean, I know he said that when there used to be a board up, with all the new films in Pinewood Studios, and you put your name down as a hand, set hand, which film did you want to be on? And they'd all put their name down for the Norman Wisdom film, because you never quite knew what was going to go on.
No, I think it's important to remember how phenomenally famous he was, and how people just really loved working with him most of the time. I should imagine.
Yeah, apart from chat shows, yeah.
Apart from chat shows.
Yeah.
I don't know whether this is an insensitive question to ask you, but I'll ask it anyway. Is there anything that really irritated you about we talked about supermarkets, for example.
Well, yeah, the chat shows. I mean, generally being out with him, if he was just just being stupid, I think, oh, for goodness sake. And also, what annoyed me, he used to asked to have his autograph. People asked for his autograph all the time. Oh, I haven't got a pen on me, sorry. And of course, that person has to go and find a pen. You've got to see, here's Norman Wisdom. I've got to seize the moment. Have anybody got a pen? And then, sorry. And then, so I'm saying to him, why don't you take a pen out with you and save yourself hours? He said, yeah, but I think they might go away, and you never know. I said, just take a pen, and he used to in the end, yeah. Yes. I mean, I can remember, oh gosh, he took me and a couple of my school friends to the London Palladium to see a pantomime with Sid James. And in the finale, Sid James, who was a good friend of mine in the audience, Norman Wisdom would like to stand up. And about an hour later, we got out of the theatre. That was it. And I remember we went backstage, and Sid James, and he said, well, thanks for that, Sid. Writer's cramp.
Did you ever go out, was it possible to go out and people not know who he was? Did he, I'm not necessarily suggesting you went out in disguise, but
No,
could he be anonymous?
No. Fun enough, when I spoke to Bruce Forsyth not long ago about the script, he said it's terrible. He said, I actually hid behind a tidy bin the other day. And I said, well, it's when you don't hide behind a tidy bin that you know when you're going downhill, Bruce. I said, it's, the price of being at the top for so long, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. and I have to ask you about people recognising you, because the similarity is...
Do you think so?
Am I the first to have ever said that?
No. As I get older, I mean, I'm the same build as him, and I've got the same movements. A lot of people say, God, you were just like your father, and you can't control it. I did front the Norman Wisdom Golf Classic in the Isle of Man a couple of years ago, and they got me on the stage to say a few words, and I told a story about golf, and people were laughing, and I thought, well, I didn't think it was that funny. And actually what they were doing, they're laughing at the similarity, and that actually made me quite nervous. And I started I stiffened up a little bit and tried to be, but you can't, I hope people didn't think I was trying to do it on purpose, but it's just natural, isn't it? It's just, sons look like their fathers and mothers, it's just the way it is.
Yes.
But because I'm the same build,
same hair.
everything's quite similar.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So people do that Mr. Grimsdale thing at you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Afraid so.
So when you leave this afternoon, don't do that.
Yeah, say what you like, but not Mr. Yeah.
I talked a minute ago about doing my research, and one of my, and I don't know whether it's one of your favourites or not, so you'll have to tell us. But one of my favourite things, which I'd seen previously, but then was reminded about, was when your father went to Buckingham Palace to collect. You know the story? You've seen the clip online. You see, I watched that, and I think probably most people watch that and laugh and laugh and laugh and laugh. And it's an iconic moment, I think, from history of something that happened, because I think it's the only time that she has laughed. I believe that's true.
Well, it's the only time someone's tripped up, isn't it? I mean,
You were there, weren't you?
I was there.
You were there.
Go back over the centuries. I mean, Sir Walter Raleigh, Sir Winston Churchill, all these people, they never tripped up, did they? No, I mean, I was there with Jackie, and we were in the back of the hall, in like a semicircular back of the hall, and all the people that are going to be honoured walk past, and they go round the side, and then walk up to the top, and then they are called out at a later time. So we're waiting for him to come, and I'm nervous, because I think surely not. Buckingham Palace, it's not the London Palladium. And then he comes, and he's walking. There's about a 25-yard walk before he's going to disappear and go around the back. And he probably gets 3/4 of the way across. And I'm thinking, good. He knows, he's realised where he is. He's behaving himself. He's looking straight ahead. And then he did this trip. And the place just fell apart. I was looking across, and there were people with medals, and they were falling off their chairs, laughing. And he didn't look up. He just kept walking, but he knew he got a good reaction. And I don't know what I said to Jackie, but I think we were pretty shocked, actually, weren't we? And I just said, "You don't think you wouldn't, would he?" And there was all that sort of thing. We were doing that, and I said, "I hope not," and he did. He did, and he tested the water, and he got a good reaction. Now, had he not got a good reaction, he wouldn't have done it.
No,
but
no.
He's met the Queen a long time, a few times. He's even done his act in Windsor Castle. So, but that doesn't excuse tripping up in the I said to him afterwards, I said, "What on earth were you doing, messing about in front of the Queen?" He said, "Don't be daft. She loved it."
Which she did.
Yeah. End of conversation.
Which she did. It was very funny. If you've not seen it recently, I encourage you to look at it on YouTube, because it certainly makes me laugh.
Yeah.
I know you didn't approve, but I found it really funny.
Oh, I was okay. I was okay with it, really.
And was he chuffed to receive his knighthood?
Oh, yes.
He was?
Yeah, I was. And it was very soon after getting an OBE. It was almost the next sort of year or 18 months. So, yeah, I was pleased for him, really.
Yeah. So just finally, I guess, you talked earlier about what you think your father would have thought of the exhibition and what his favourite film might have been. But what do you think is his legacy, I suppose? What do you think people's lasting impression? What would you want?
Well, I think I think he had a great rapport with the public. Like I say, he would always sign autographs and make public appearances for them. I think he's eternally grateful for the fans who put him on the road to stardom, basically. He owes a lot to the people of this country. He felt they were all his friends, really. And I mean, he would invite people who met him in the Isle of Man would suddenly find themselves up at his house in the north of the island having a cup of coffee, because that's what he would. He'd invite them up. Personally, I felt I had to do the exhibition. I felt it was, something I had to do. It was a lot of fun. It was emotional, and I almost felt he was standing over me while I compiled it, saying, "No, don't put that picture there. Put that one over there." Anyway, and I think I've got his approval on that one anyway. So there we are. Thank you very much.
Well, it's been an honour to talk to you this afternoon. It's certainly been an honour to be involved in a small way in the exhibition. And what you may not know is the exhibition has proved so popular that Nick has agreed for it to stay here until I think the end of April. So clearly you've all seen it. I hope you've all seen it anyway. If you know other people that you think would be interested, then please help spread the word. But it'll be up. Initially it was just for the festival, but it'll be up until certainly the end of April. And Nick, I just want to thank you so much for coming today and for talking to us. Thank you very much.
Thanks for coming. There we are.